where Eagles Dare wasn't just another World War II thriller with Alpine scenery and action sequences. It was a calculated experiment in audience manipulation, a production that rewrote the rules of how action films could be made, and a shoot so dangerous that insurance companies nearly shut it down multiple times. Here are 20 weird facts about Where Eagles Dare that reveal the chaos behind the classic. But first, stick around for the bonus fact about what really happened to all those explosives after filming wrapped. Let's go. The novel was written specifically to become a film. Alistair MacLean didn't independently conceive Where Eagles Dare. He was commissioned to write it as a film first and a novel second. Producer Elliot Kastner approached him with a rare proposal: craft a World War II action story specifically designed for the screen, and the book would be published alongside the movie's development. Although MacLean had written The Guns of Navarone, he had never written a screenplay. Working from his Swiss chalet, he built the story backwards from huge action set pieces, designing scenes with camera movement, stunt logistics, and cinematic pacing in mind. The novel, published in 1967, was essentially a polished movie treatment in prose form. The experiment proved stories could be engineered for cinematic impact from the start. Richard Burton demanded more action for his character. Richard Burton accepted Where Eagles Dare, expecting a cerebral spy thriller with minimal physical involvement. But after reading the script, he realized Clint Eastwood's character had far more action scenes and a much higher on-screen kill count. Ego and star status pushed Burton to demand revisions. He insisted his character, Major Smith, participate more aggressively in combat. MacLean returned to rewrite several sequences, boosting Burton's involvement and raising the film's overall body count. Eastwood, still shaping his post-Western career, didn't object to sharing the action spotlight. The changes shifted Smith from a purely strategic mastermind into a fully active combatant. Critics later noted the unusually high casualty rate, but Burton got exactly what he wanted: equal footing as a 1960s action hero. Clint Eastwood was paid more than Richard Burton. Although Richard Burton was the established star and respected Shakespearean actor, Clint Eastwood earned the higher salary on Where Eagles Dare. Coming off the explosive international success of his spaghetti westerns with Sergio Leone, Eastwood negotiated a deal that included a larger base pay and a percentage of the film's profits. Burton received a substantial flat fee, but no back end. The pay structure reflected Hollywood's shifting economics prestige, no longer guaranteed the highest paycheck. Eastwood's global popularity, especially in Europe, made him the true box office draw MGM needed. Burton reportedly discovered the pay imbalance during filming and wasn't thrilled, but he remained professional. The deal foreshadowed the rise of action stars commanding blockbuster-level salaries in the following decade. The cable car sequence used real stunts at deadly heights. The famous cable car sequence wasn't created with tricks real stuntmen performed on actual moving cable cars suspended hundreds of feet above the Austrian Alps. The production filmed on the Felber-Bond cable system, securing rare permission to shoot while the cars traveled between valley stations and mountain peaks. Stunt coordinator Yakima Knut designed dangerously ambitious sequences requiring performers to fight on roofs, hang from edges, and cross spans with nothing below them but open air. Only small safety wires were allowed; nets weren't feasible at those heights. Filming occurred during brief windows of calm weather, and insurance nearly pulled coverage when they learned the full scope. The resulting footage remains genuinely tense because it captured real, life-threatening risk. The castle location was the real Hohenwerfen Fortress. Director Brian Hutton rejected artificial backlots and matte paintings, insisting on filming at an authentic medieval fortress to match MacLean's vision. The production secured Austria's 11th century Hohenwerfen Castle, perched dramatically on a mountain above the Salzach Valley. Its real stone walls and imposing structure were perfect, but brought significant problems. The castle lacked modern heating, had limited electrical infrastructure, and sat at the end of a mountain road that frequently closed due to snow. Generators, lighting, and set pieces had to be transported carefully to avoid damaging protected historical surfaces. Interior scenes were filmed in genuine medieval chambers, creating audio challenges as sound echoed through stone corridors. The result gave the film a visual authenticity impossible to fake on a soundstage. Filming occurred during one of Austria's worst winters. The production intentionally scheduled winter filming to capture real snow, but the 1967-68 Austrian winter became one of the harshest on record. Cast and crew woke each morning to buried equipment, frozen cables, and roads blocked by heavy overnight snowfall. Access to Hohenwerfen Castle and the cable car stations required constant plowing. Actors wore thin period-accurate costumes that offered almost no insulation, so between takes they were wrapped in heavy jackets and blankets. Burton struggled with the brutal cold, while Eastwood adapted more easily due to experience filming in rugged outdoor locations. The extreme weather caused delays and budget overruns, but gave the film undeniable realism. Every shiver, every breath cloud, every snow-lashed scene reflects genuine misery, not movie magic. Alistair MacLean wrote the entire screenplay himself. Hiring a novelist to write their first screenplay represented an enormous gamble. MacLean had never formatted a script, never worked with industry standards for scene description or dialogue notation. Producers assigned him a technical advisor to handle formatting while MacLean focused on content. The result was an unusually detailed screenplay that read more like a novel than a typical shooting script. MacLean included extensive description of settings, character motivations, and action choreography that screenwriters normally left to directors. His inexperience with film economy meant scenes ran longer than necessary, requiring editing before production, but his outsider perspective brought advantages. Unconstrained by Hollywood conventions, he created set pieces that seemed impossible, forcing the production team to innovate. His dialogue felt more literary than typical action films, giving characters unexpected depth. The famous broadsword calling Danny boy radio communication code came directly from MacLean's military knowledge and love of dramatic phrasing. Professional screenwriters might have simplified the plot's numerous twists and double crosses. MacLean kept them all, creating a genuinely complex narrative that rewarded audience attention. The film's budget ballooned to nearly double original estimates. MGM greenlit Where Eagles Dare with a projected budget of approximately $4 million. Final costs exceeded $7 million, an enormous overrun for 1968. The Austrian location shooting proved far more expensive than anticipated. Weather delays meant paying cast and crew for unproductive days. The authentic locations required extensive logistics, transporting equipment up mountains, securing permits for public locations, coordinating with local authorities. Stunt sequences required specialized personnel and safety equipment that hadn't been budgeted adequately. The film's extensive practical effects explosions, gunfire, elaborate set destruction consumed resources rapidly. Each explosion required permits, safety crews, and often
who worked for us in London and were discovered.
The production's commitment to authenticity meant rejecting cost-saving measures like miniatures or rear projection for key sequences. Studio executives watched nervously as costs escalated, but early footage convinced them they had something special. The gamble paid off. Where Eagles Dare became one of 1968's highest-grossing films, earning back its inflated budget multiple times over through theatrical release and subsequent television sales. Burton and Eastwood barely interacted off-camera. On-screen chemistry doesn't require off-screen friendship, and Burton and Eastwood proved it. Though always professional, they lived in entirely different worlds during production. Burton, often accompanied by Elizabeth Taylor, embraced a lifestyle of fine dining and cultural salons. Eastwood kept to himself, avoiding the social whirlwind and focusing on early nights and quiet routine. Their acting styles clashed too. Burton favored theatrical preparation and long discussions, while Eastwood preferred minimalism, instinct, and efficiency. This contrast caused occasional tension during rehearsals, with Burton wanting exploration and Eastwood wanting to move on. Director Brian Hutton balanced both needs. Ironically, their distance enhanced the film. The characters weren't close, and neither were the actors, making their on-screen dynamic feel authentic. The film features minimal actual dialogue for extended sequences. MacLean structured Where Eagles Dare with unusual faith in visual storytelling. Multiple extended sequences, the initial parachute drop, the cable car approach, infiltration of the castle unfold with almost no dialogue. Characters communicate through gestures, expressions, and action rather than exposition. For 1960s action cinema, Accustomed to explaining everything verbally, this represented a bold choice. Ron Goodwin's driving musical score carried these sequences, building tension without words. Hutton embraced the approach, recognizing that audiences didn't need constant explanation. The technique anticipated modern action filmmaking, where competent cinematography and editing convey narrative without dialogue. It also played to Eastwood's strengths. His screen presence communicated volumes without speaking. Burton, the trained orator, had to adjust to sequences where his theatrical skills were unnecessary. The minimal dialogue gave the film an almost documentary quality during action sequences, as if cameras were simply observing trained operatives executing a mission. Audiences leaned forward, engaged by the silence, forced to pay attention to visual details rather than passive listening. Go ahead and like and subscribe because this gets even more interesting. Real explosives were used for nearly every blast, where Eagles Dare relied almost entirely on real explosives, not special effects tricks. In 1968, practical effects meant actual charges placed and detonated by trained specialists. The film features dozens of explosions, vehicles erupting, buildings collapsing, equipment destroyed, and every blast required precise calculations to avoid accidents. The climactic communications room explosion demanded weeks of preparation, with charges embedded throughout the custom-built set and cameras positioned at maximum safe distance. The crew had only one chance. If the cameras jammed or timing failed, the entire set would need rebuilding. The pressure was enormous, but the results were unmatched. The concussive force, debris patterns, and genuine fear in actors' reactions came from real danger. No digital effect could recreate that authenticity. Mary Ure performed her own stunts despite directors' concerns. Mary Ure, the only woman in the cast, insisted on performing her own stunts despite the director's concerns. Brian Hutton feared delays or injury, but Ure was determined to prove she could match her male co-stars physically. She trained rigorously before filming, learning weapons handling, safe falling techniques, and close combat movement. During the cable car sequences, she climbed ladders, balanced on narrow interior platforms, and acted inside genuinely precarious positions on the moving cars. Insurance companies objected, but her contract gave her unusual freedom over her performance. Ure sustained minor injuries, bruises, and muscle strains that she often hid to avoid being replaced by a double. Her commitment elevated her character, portraying a capable active agent rarely seen in 1960s action cinema. The film was banned in several countries for violence, where Eagles Dare pushed violence further than most 1960s war films, resulting in bans or cuts in several countries. The body count was unusually high, and the intense gunfire, close-range kills, and brutal combat shocked censors accustomed to cleaner depictions of war. The British Board of Film Classification initially demanded edits, objecting to specific stabbings, close-up shootings, and implied torture. MGM created toned-down versions for stricter territories but fought to keep the original cut where possible. Ironically, the controversy boosted ticket sales. Audiences wanted to see what had caused such alarm. Although modern viewers find the violence mild by today's standards, in 1968 it marked a major escalation, defining the film as one of the decade's most intense action experiences. Ron Goodwin composed the score in just 3 weeks. The iconic march theme that drives Where Eagles Dare came together under impossible time pressure. Ron Goodwin received the assignment late in post-production after another composer fell through. He had 3 weeks to score a 158-minute film packed with action, requiring carefully timed musical cues. Goodwin worked 18-hour days composing directly while watching rough cuts, crafting themes that would become inseparable from the film's identity. His main theme, a driving march with military precision and heroic brass, captured exactly the combination of danger and adventure the film projected. He composed variations of this theme for different sequences, quiet and tense for infiltration scenes, bombastic and triumphant for action sequences. The rushed timeline forced him to trust his instincts rather than overthinking arrangements. He recorded with a full orchestra in marathon sessions, adjusting cues in real time as they watched playback. The score's effectiveness proved that time constraints sometimes produce better results than endless refinement. That theme became so identified with the film that it's still used in documentaries and retrospectives about World War II despite being written 2 decades after the war ended. Clint Eastwood performed the famous bus stunt himself. The sequence where an operative leaps onto a moving bus required split-second timing and significant physical risk. Eastwood insisted on performing it without a stunt double. The scene called for him to time a jump from a stationary position onto the bus as it passed, then climb through a window while it was moving. Stunt coordinators choreographed the sequence carefully, but variables remained the bus driver's exact speed, Eastwood's jump timing, his grip on the bus exterior. They had limited takes before losing light and needing the location for other scenes. Eastwood rehearsed the physical motions repeatedly, then executed it successfully on the second take. The first attempt had mistimed slightly. His hand placement wasn't optimal for the camera angle. The successful take appears in the film, Eastwood's genuine athleticism evident as he pulls himself through the window. He sustained minor scrapes and bruises, but nothing serious. The decision to perform his own stunt reflected both his confidence in his physical abilities and his understanding that authentic movement reads differently on camera than even skilled stunt double work. Audiences could sense they were watching the actual actor in genuine peril. The script's complex plot confused test audiences. Preview screenings revealed a surprising issue, where Eagle's Dare was so intricately plotted that many test audiences became confused. They loved the action but struggled to track the double agents, triple crosses, and intentionally misleading information woven into the story. MacLean's literary complexity worked brilliantly on the page, where readers could pause but overwhelmed viewers experiencing it in real time. MGM considered ordering reshoots to insert clearer explanations. Director Brian Hutton pushed back, arguing that simplifying the story would insult intelligent audiences and weaken the film's sophistication. The studio compromised by adding a handful of clarifying lines through post-production dialogue, but kept the plot intact. The gamble paid off. Critics praised the film's intelligence, and confused viewers returned for second showings to catch missed details. What first seemed like a flaw became a selling point. With home video, the layered narrative became one of the film's greatest strengths. Elizabeth Taylor's set visits created media chaos. Richard Burton's wife, Elizabeth Taylor, visited the Austrian location multiple times during production. Her presence transformed the set into a media circus. Photographers and journalists who'd largely ignored the production suddenly swarmed the area, desperate for photos of the world's most famous actress. Taylor, accustomed to attention, handled it gracefully. But the disruption to filming was significant. Crowd control became necessary around locations that previously had minimal security. Local Austrian residents flooded areas hoping to glimpse Taylor, making it impossible to film exterior scenes with background control. The production had to adjust shooting schedules around her visits, filming interiors or closed-set sequences when she was present. Eastwood found the chaos amusing, the opposite of his preferred low-key approach. Burton accepted it as the cost of his marriage to the world's biggest star. Taylor occasionally watched filming from heated tents, offering Burton notes on his performance that he'd diplomatically consider and usually ignore. Her visits added thousands to the budget in security and crowd management costs, but they also generated publicity that money couldn't buy. Every newspaper covering Taylor's movements mentioned the film. The film inspired real military tactical training materials, where Eagle's Dare earned unexpected respect from military observers for its unusually accurate depiction of special operations. Drawing on his wartime experience and extensive research, Alistair MacLean crafted mission sequences that reflected real special forces tactics. After the film's release, several military training programs reportedly used selected scenes as teaching tools for infiltration techniques, operational security, and coordinated teamwork under pressure. The film illustrated concepts such as layered deception, maintaining cover identities, secure communication, and precise timing for complex operations. While Hollywood dramatization was still present, the underlying tactical logic impressed professionals. Even the famous cable car infiltration, though fictional, demonstrated creative problem-solving for approaching a fortified position. Instructors used it to spark discussion on risk assessment and alternative strategies. Beyond training, the film left a cultural imprint. The radio call "broadsword calling Danny Boy" entered military slang, and decades later, Special Forces personnel still reference the movie, recognizing that it captured the mindset behind real covert missions. The helicopter crash scene used a real aircraft. The sequence where a German helicopter is destroyed involved crashing an actual aircraft. The production purchased a decommissioned helicopter, confirmed it would never fly again, and prepared it for controlled destruction. Special effects teams removed all fuel and hazardous materials, then positioned it precisely where it would crash and burn for cameras. Explosive charges were embedded to ensure ignition on impact. Stunt performers rehearsed escape routes from nearby positions. The crew got one opportunity to capture the crash correctly. There would be no second takes. Multiple cameras at different angles documented the event simultaneously. On action, the helicopter was dropped from a crane onto rocky terrain while charges detonated, creating the illusion of a combat shoot-down. The resulting fireball was genuine, fueled by accelerants, placed strategically for maximum visual impact. Safety crews stood by with fire suppression equipment, but the scene had to burn long enough for adequate footage. The practical destruction gave the sequence authenticity impossible to achieve with miniatures or the limited special effects technology available in 1968. When audiences watched that helicopter burn, they were seeing an actual aircraft destroyed specifically for the film. Burton's drinking didn't affect his performance. Richard Burton's reputation for heavy drinking was well established by 1968. Production executives worried his consumption would cause delays or affect performance quality. They were wrong. Burton maintained absolute professionalism on set, arriving prepared and delivering takes without apparent impairment. His drinking occurred exclusively during off hours, never interfering with call times or work quality. Cast and crew members later reported that while Burton consumed impressive amounts during evenings and weekends, he transformed completely when cameras rolled. His theatrical training and professional discipline overrode any effects. Director Hutton never had to address Burton's drinking because it never became a production issue. Eastwood, observing Burton's habits, maintained respectful distance, but acknowledged grudging admiration for Burton's ability to party extensively, then perform flawlessly the next morning. The contrast between Burton's off-screen lifestyle and his on-screen professionalism became legendary among crew members. Whatever struggles Burton faced personally, he never let them compromise his work. Where Eagles Dare showcases Burton at full capability, charismatic, commanding, fully present. If audiences detect weariness in his performance, it's acting choice, not personal struggle bleeding through. Bonus fact, the leftover explosives were stolen. After filming wrapped, the production had significant quantities of unused explosives stored in secured containers at the Austrian location. Despite security measures, thieves broke into the storage facility and made off with substantial amounts of explosive materials. Austrian police launched an investigation, concerned about dangerous materials in criminal hands. The theft created international headlines when news broke weeks later. Speculation erupted about who took them and for what purpose. Were they common criminals seeking to sell dangerous materials? Political extremists acquiring supplies? The investigation never conclusively identified the perpetrators, though theories abounded. MGM faced criticism for inadequate security of hazardous materials, though they'd followed standard industry protocols. The incident prompted stricter regulations for explosive storage on European film productions. No attacks or incidents were ever definitively linked to the stolen materials, but the mystery remained unsolved. The bizarre postscript to Where Eagles Dare's production added another layer of intrigue to a film already packed with real-world drama behind its fictional espionage. Where Eagles Dare endures not despite its chaotic production, but because of it. The real danger freezing conditions, live explosives and stunts performed at deadly heights gave the film an authenticity audiences could feel. Alistair MacLean's inexperience as a screenwriter created a more complex literary plot than Hollywood would normally allow, while Burton and Eastwood's contrasting styles added tension that elevated their characters. The film proved that taking risks, harsh locations, intricate storytelling, and pushing violence boundaries could produce something timeless. More than 50 years later, it still feels immediate and visceral. If you enjoyed these behind-the-scenes secrets, like and subscribe for more. Sometimes the real drama happens behind the camera,